All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're looking at a pretty wild theory, one that claims those huge financial crises we see, they're not accidents at all. According to this source, they're engineered. Let's break it down. So here's the central question, right? Think about those massive economic meltdowns, the ones that just wipe out people's savings, cost them their homes. Are they just bad luck? An unfortunate but natural part of the cycle? Or is there something else going on? I mean, if you've ever cracked open an econ textbook, you know the drill. They call it the boom bust cycle. It's this story we're all told. Times are good, people get a little too confident, a bubble forms, and pop. It's presented like it's a law of nature, kind of like economic gravity. What goes up must come down. But this is where our source throws a real curveball. It asks a pretty radical question. What if it's not gravity? What if that pop isn't an accident? What if the entire game is rigged? Rigged in a way that makes these collapses not just predictable, but incredibly profitable for a very, very small group of people. Okay, so that sets up two completely different ways of looking at a collapse. Let's put them side by side, the official story versus what this source is claiming. And here's the real difference, you guys. The official view basically says, hey, we all got a little crazy, it's a collective mistake. But the source? It says a small group of powerful players actually pulls the trigger. The collapse doesn't just happen, it's set in motion. And why would they do that? Simple. Because at a certain point, it becomes way more profitable to bet on failure than it is to bet on success. So if a collapse is engineered, who are the engineers? Well, the source has a name for them. It calls them the game masters. So let's take a look at who they're talking about. The main actor in this whole drama is something the source calls transnational capital. Now, don't think of a country or a government. Think of a global network of super elite financial interests. These guys operate completely outside of national borders. According to this theory, their only loyalty, their only flag is profit. And look, this isn't just some vague idea. The source points to actual institutions that it claims are key players in this network. We're talking about the Bank of International Settlements, the central bank for central banks, plus the IMF, the World Bank, and of course, the big financial hubs like Wall Street and the City of London. The source uses this really powerful analogy. It compares our whole economy to Plato's cave. The idea is that most of us, we're just staring at shadows on a wall, things like money, stock prices, debt, and we think that's reality. But according to this theory, the so-called game masters are the ones behind us, holding up the objects in front of the fire. They're casting the shadows. They're controlling the whole show. So you might be wondering, how did a system like this even get started? Well, the source argues this is nothing new. In fact, it's a playbook that's been perfected for, get this, over 300 years. So, according to this theory, the story starts way back in 1694 with the Bank of England. This was a private bank created to fund the government. That model apparently worked so well that it was brought over to America in 1914 with the U.S. Federal Reserve. Now you fast forward all the way to 2008, and that, the source claims, is when we see this old playbook put into action on a global scale. And this playbook supposedly runs on 3 core principles. They're simple, but they're pretty brutal. Rule number 1, privatize the profits. The elite keep all the winnings. Rule number 2, socialize the losses. When things go bad, the public, that's you and me, the taxpayers, we pick up the tab. And rule number 3, you have to keep generating activity to make money. And the source points to something like war as the ultimate for-profit activity. Okay, let's bring this down to earth a bit. The source uses the 2008 financial crisis as its Exhibit A. And here's the kicker. It argues that 2008 wasn't a failure of the system. It was the system working perfectly and ruthlessly. Take a look at this number, $20 billion. That's how much money the source claims one investor, John Paulson, made during the crisis. But here's the thing. He didn't make that money by betting on the housing market. He made it by betting against it, betting it would fail. And that just makes you stop and think, right? How is that even possible? How does one person make a fortune from a disaster that literally ruined the lives of millions of people? Well, the source argues it's not luck, it's by design. Okay, this is the absolute core of the source's argument. It claims that the banks could have actually kept things going. They could have just rolled over the bad loans. But, and this is a huge but, massive, Massive bets had been placed that homeowners would default. And at that critical moment, the theory goes, it became way more profitable to just pull the plug, trigger the collapse, and cash in on those bets than it was to keep the whole thing stable. And what happened next? A gigantic transfer of wealth. Just look at this. While regular people were losing their homes, you can see corporate ownership of homes just exploding. And then mega corporate ownership, it goes off the charts. The source points to this as the proof. The crisis wasn't just a crash, it was a fire sale that allowed assets to be consolidated into the hands of a very powerful few.
All right, so if 2008 was one move in the playbook, the source then asks, what's the next move? And the theory is that this network, this transnational capital, is already setting up the pieces for its next big play.
According to this theory, the US is starting to look like a problem for this network. You've got an aging elite, way too much money sloshing around the system, and a military that's stretched thin. So where do they look next? The source claims Israel is being positioned as the next big opportunity. And why? Because it supposedly offers everything the system craves. Constant activity through conflict, which then leads to massive and profitable rebuilding projects, plus the potential to become a brand new hub for global trade.
So this is where it all leads. The theory's ultimate claim is that the next big play is to engineer a collapse of the US economy itself. Why? So they can sell off their investments at the top, profit from the chaos, and then come back in and buy up America's most valuable assets. We're talking water rights, oil, key infrastructure for pennies on the dollar.
It all boils down to the core belief of this theory. In chaos, there's profit. It's a pretty killing thought, isn't it? It completely reframes economic disasters. They're not failures to be avoided. They're opportunities to be capitalized on. And I guess the question the source leaves us with is, what happens when the stability we all rely on becomes less profitable than the chaos that might just be waiting to take its place?